The hills of Galilee, drenched in the late afternoon sun, glowed in hues of amber and rose. The olive groves shimmered in the light breeze that swept across the land, and the distant sound of birds echoed in the valleys below. 4 days Jesus and his disciples had traveled, speaking to the crowds, healing the sick, and spreading the message of love and redemption. Now, as the day drew to a close, they found a moment of peace, gathering under the shade of a great fig tree. The fire in front of them crackled softly, sending gentle sparks into the air. The mood was reflective yet peaceful as the disciples rested after their long journey. Though their spirits were high, there was an unspoken tension, particularly from Peter. Normally the first to speak, Peter now sat quietly, his hands clasped together, his brow furrowed in thought. Jesus, sitting with his back against the tree, watched his disciples closely. He could sense the mixture of emotions in their hearts, their exhaustion, their joy, and their uncertainties. He knew that Peter, especially, carried a burden, one that needed to be lifted if he was to continue on the path laid before him. After a while, the conversation among the disciples quieted. The group began to notice Peter's silence, which was unlike him. Andrew glanced at Peter with concern, and John, always sensitive to the emotions of others, shifted closer as if to offer support. But it was Jesus who spoke first, his voice as soft and calming as the breeze that rustled the leaves above them. "Peter," he said gently, "what is it that troubles your heart?" The disciples turned their attention to Peter, waiting for him to speak. Peter hesitated, his eyes cast downward as though he was ashamed of what he felt. But after a long moment he looked up at Jesus, his voice low and full of uncertainty. "Master," he began, "I've been struggling. I've listened to your teachings and I believe in everything you've told us. But when I go out into the world, when I speak with others, I feel lost. I want to stand firm in your truth, but sometimes I find myself either shouting, trying too hard to be heard, or staying silent because I'm afraid of causing offense or being rejected. I don't know how to balance it. I fear that if I speak too boldly, I'll push people away, but if I say nothing, I betray everything I believe." His voice trembled slightly, and his confession resonated deeply with the others. Several of the disciples nodded subtly, as they too had felt the same tension between wanting to be heard and fearing the consequences of speaking too boldly. Jesus, seeing their shared struggle, looked upon Peter with deep compassion. Rather than answering immediately, Jesus allowed a moment of silence to stretch between them. The evening light grew softer, bathing the hills in a golden glow. Then, with a gentle smile, Jesus began to tell a story. "There was once a shepherd," Jesus began, "who lived in a small village in the valley. He was a man of simple means, but he loved his sheep dearly. Every morning he would rise before the sun, leading them to the green pastures where they could graze. He watched over them with care, tending to their needs and protecting them from any danger that came their way. The sheep trusted him completely, for they knew that he would never lead them astray." The disciples, accustomed to the wisdom within Jesus' stories, leaned in slightly, their attention fully captured. Peter's eyes lifted, drawn to the calm, steady rhythm of Jesus' voice. "One day," Jesus continued, "as the shepherd led his flock along a narrow path through the valley, a terrible storm began to gather. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind howled through the mountains. The sheep, frightened by the thunder and flashes of lightning, began to panic. They scattered in every direction, driven by their fear. The shepherd saw this and knew he had to act quickly. But instead of shouting or chasing after them, he walked calmly into the heart of the valley, where his flock was scattered." Jesus paused, the tension in the story drawing the disciples in even further. They could almost see the storm raging, hear the wind whipping through the valley. The shepherd did not yell or force his sheep to return to him. Instead he called out to them one by name. His voice was not loud, but it was steady, filled with love and confidence. Even as the storm raged around him, he remained calm, trusting that his sheep would hear his voice and return to him. And one by one they did. Slowly but surely each sheep came back to him, drawn not by force or fear, but by the shepherd's quiet strength. In the end, every one of his sheep was gathered safely around him, and he led them out of the storm and into safety. Jesus let the final words linger in the air, the silence that followed filled with the weight of the story. The disciples, lost in their own thoughts, reflected on the deeper meaning behind the shepherd's actions. Peter, especially, seemed to be deeply moved by the image of the calm, patient shepherd guiding his flock through the storm. After a long pause, Peter spoke again, his voice tinged with both understanding and sorrow. "Master, I hear your story and I understand the lesson. But, how can I be like that shepherd? How can I speak with calmness and confidence when I am so afraid of being rejected or misunderstood? I don't know how to find that strength." Jesus, ever patient, reached out and placed his hand on Peter's shoulder, offering both comfort and guidance. Peter, the shepherd, did not rely on force to guide his sheep. He did not shout to be heard over the storm. Instead, he stood firm, speaking with love and certainty, trusting that his flock would hear him. Assertiveness, my friend, is not about overpowering others or forcing them to listen. It is about standing firm in your truth, even when the winds of fear or rejection swirl around you. Peter looked into Jesus' eyes, his own brimming with tears. "But what if I speak and they do not listen? What if my words are rejected?" Jesus' gaze softened, and he answered with a quiet wisdom that always brought comfort to his disciples. "Peter, your task is not to control how others respond to your words. Your task is to speak with love, with clarity, and with conviction. You are responsible for your own truth, not for how others receive it." The shepherd in the story did not force his sheep to return. He simply called them, trusting in the bond of love he had built with them. And they came because they trusted him. The disciples listened in silence, each of them reflecting on the weight of the lesson. Jesus' words had struck at the heart of their fears and uncertainties, offering a path forward that did not rely on control or force. Peter, moved by the depth of the teaching, wiped his eyes and spoke again. "I understand, Master. I have always thought that strength came from being loud or powerful, but now I see that true strength comes from love and from standing firm, even when it is hard. I will try to be like the shepherd. I will speak with love and trust that the truth will be enough." Jesus smiled warmly, his heart full of love for his disciple. "That is all I ask, Peter. Speak your truth, but always let love be your guide." Assertiveness is not about dominating others or remaining silent out of fear. It is about standing firm in your truth while offering your words with kindness, with patience, and with a heart full of love. The other disciples too were visibly moved. They had all faced moments where they either spoke too harshly or stayed silent out of fear. But now they understood that true assertiveness, true strength, lay in the middle path where love and truth intersected. As the conversation waned, the evening deepened into twilight. The sky above them was now a canvas of deep purples and soft blues, dotted with the first stars of the night. The air grew cooler, but the warmth of the fire and the presence of their teacher kept them comforted. Jesus, standing up, looked out over the hills, his eyes tracing the horizon as if seeing something far beyond what the others could. "The storm will come again," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. "But when it does, remember the shepherd. Strength does not come from shouting or from remaining silent. It comes from standing firm in love, from speaking your truth without fear." Peter, still processing the depth of the lesson, felt a profound peace wash over him. The burden that had weighed so heavily on his heart seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet understanding. He realized that his fears, of rejection, of not being heard, had clouded his ability to stand firm in what he believed. But now, with Jesus' words echoing in his heart, he knew that he could face the world with both love and strength. The disciples slowly began to gather their things, preparing to rest for the night. But Peter lingered by the fire for a moment longer, gazing at the flames as they flickered and danced. His heart was full, not just with understanding but with a deep sense of purpose. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he did not walk it alone. Jesus, sensing Peter's thoughts, approached him once more. "Peter," he said softly, "you will face many storms in the days to come. But remember what I have taught you. Stand firm in your truth, but always speak with love. That is where your strength lies." Peter looked up at Jesus, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I will, Master," he promised. "I will stand firm and I will speak with love." The night passed peacefully, and when morning came, the disciples awoke to a new day filled with light and hope. As they prepared to continue their journey, the lesson of the shepherd remained with them, a quiet strength that would guide them through the trials and challenges they would face in the days and years ahead. For Peter especially, the lesson of assertiveness, of standing firm in love and truth, became a guiding principle, one that would shape his life and his mission. He no longer feared his own voice, nor did he fear the reactions of others. He knew that his strength lay not in overpowering others, but in offering his truth with love, trusting that those who were meant to hear it would come, just as the sheep had come to the shepherd. And so, with hearts full of peace and purpose, Jesus and his disciples continued their journey, carrying with them the wisdom of the shepherd, the strength of love, and the courage to speak their truth, even in the face of the storm. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.